No one, black or white, was prepared for what happened on the night of May 31st, 1921.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for world events from throughout history that are often omitted or glossed over in schools. Number 20. Manco Inca Rebellion. South American history in general is often not taught outside the continent. More on that later. During the Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire, the conquistadors installed a puppet emperor, Manco Inca Yupanqui, to rule. However, Manco received such mistreatment at their hands that he rebelled. Under the pretext of retrieving a golden statue, Manco escaped his guards and managed to rally Inca warriors to his cause. With somewhere between 100 and 200,000 men, he laid siege to Cusco in what is now Peru. Despite a sustained guerrilla campaign and taking advantage of internal divisions among the Spanish, Manco was eventually assassinated, and his successors could not offer the same resistance. Number 19. Business plot. In the wake of Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, not everybody in America was happy.
Roosevelt needed an enemy in order to justify the major changes he knew he would have to undertake to get the economy moving.
In fact, some wealthy businessmen decided that FDR would have to go, permanently. They hatched a conspiracy to lead a military coup against the president. They approached retired Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler to gather a veterans organization together to lead the planned coup. However, they underestimated how much Butler disliked the rich and supported Roosevelt. Butler alerted the federal government of the plot, leading to him testifying before a committee about the plot, although no one was ever prosecuted. Sadly, this would not be the last time far-right extremists tried to overthrow the U.S. government, with depressingly few consequences.
That is one of the closest historical parallels to what happened on January 6th. Sort of a motley assortment of groups, some of which hate each other, others are kind of unaligned, but they're all sort of working together in this effort to overthrow a democracy.
Number 18. Expulsion of the Acadians. Given that this event happened during the French and Indian War, it's understandable why it fell through the historical curriculum cracks. Wars just get more attention.
And in the meantime, the war went on. The tide might have turned at last, but hard fighting still lay ahead before the capture of Montreal and the final surrender of the French.
Acadia, a former French colony in what is now the Maritimes of Canada and Maine in the United States, was ceded to Britain. However, some Acadian colonists remained loyal to France and aided them militarily. Regardless of their affiliation, Britain decided to forcibly deport over 11,000 Acadians, nearly half of whom died of disease or drowning on boats.
It was here that they were given their deportation orders. 2,000 Acadians were expelled, placed on small boats, and rowed out to larger ships waiting in the Minas Basin. Over the next 7 years, 10,000 Acadians were deported from the area.
Scholars today have labeled this event a crime against humanity, with some even considering it a genocide. Number 17. Port Chicago disaster. Nearly 1 in 7 Black American military personnel during World War II didn't die abroad, but in a naval munitions hub in California.
The black sailors went through basic training, hoping to fight the enemy on the front lines, but they were barred from combat roles. At Port Chicago, they were assigned the most dangerous job, the loading of munitions.
The Concord Naval Weapons Station at Port Chicago was disproportionately staffed with the lowest-scoring black naval personnel, most of whom weren't given training in handling munitions. On July 17, 1944, the SS E.A. Bryan was loaded up with 4,600 tons of explosives. At 10:20 p.m., the ship exploded, leading to the deaths of 320 men, injuries to 400 more people, a chain reaction of further explosions, and shockwaves large enough to be registered on the Richter scale.
The blast instantly killed 320 men, most of them black sailors. It injured more than 400 others.
A subsequent mutiny and refusal to work in unsafe conditions did lead to greater desegregation in the Navy, so some good came of it. Number 16. British Pet Massacre. War often leads to rationing and tougher living conditions all around, not only for humans, but also for pets. After the declaration of war with Germany in 1939, a pamphlet was distributed that suggested euthanizing pets as an option, should owners be forced to evacuate and be unable to place the pets with someone. Although feral pets during the First World War had also been a problem, the public's reaction was seen as overblown practically immediately. This minor piece of advice led to widespread panic among the British populace and the deaths of around 25% of the pets in England, some 750,000 cats and dogs. Number 15. Zootsuit Riots. World War II is often seen as causing countries to come together to face a common foe, but it also brought out divisions. In Los Angeles, California, Latino and Mexican-American youths often wore zoot suits, oversized baggy coats and pants.
Many young Mexican Americans started donning the Zootsuit, a style that incorporated an oversized coat, pork pie hat, long chain, thick-soled shoes, and baggy pants. This fashion evolved out of Harlem nightclubs and was popularized by cultural icons like Duke Ellington and Cab Calloway.
However, due to their association with a controversial and blatantly racist smear campaign by police and the media, the Zoot Suiters were regarded as criminals. This exploded in early June 1943, when primarily white American military servicemen and Angelenos attacked young men and teenagers wearing zoot suits, considering the large amount of fabric on their clothing unpatriotic amid wartime rationing, plus the aforementioned racism.
Even though the U.S. government came in, pretty much stopped the rioting and the sailors from going amok, the LA city itself went crazy to arrest Pachucos, put them away.
While there were no deaths, the fact that many victims were arrested instead of the perpetrators is despicable. Number 14. South American independence. We said we'd get back to South America. While North American independence from imperial rule is often well documented there, its neighbors to the south are taught to them far less, and there are so many to choose from. There's Simón Bolívar and his creation of Gran Colombia.
Bolívar helped create Gran Colombia, a federation that is now the countries of Colombia, Venezuela, Panama, and Ecuador. Although the federation would ultimately fail, Bolívar acknowledged his people's successful fight for independence.
José de San Martín liberated Argentina, Chile, and Peru. And then there's that time a Portuguese prince founded the Empire of Brazil. Each of these revolutions had their own bloody struggles, and likely wouldn't have been possible if their European colonizers weren't so busy dealing with issues closer to home, like that Napoleon guy.
Instrumental to Napoleon's success was his skill as a leader. He didn't just inspire people, he made them feel that they were taking part in history.
Number 13. Tuskegee Syphilis Study. In 1932, 600 poor Alabama black men were enrolled in a study conducted by the CDC and the U.S. Public Health Service. Of these men, almost 400 had syphilis, though they were not informed of this diagnosis.
400 black men in Alabama were screened out and offered free medical treatment for what they were told was bad blood. In fact, they had syphilis, and the government wanted to see what happens when syphilis goes untreated.
The purpose of the experiment was to study the effects of the disease if left untreated. They were given placebos instead. Despite penicillin being discovered during the extensive term of the study, none of them were informed or treated during the 40 years it continued for. Even after losing funding, the barbaric experiment continued until it was finally exposed in 1972.
Immediately after the story broke in 1972, a congressional investigation began. The first decision was to stop the experiment. But no one was ever prosecuted. No doctor was ever reprimanded.
Although its exposure led to greater protections for medical trial participants, public trust for health departments, particularly in the black community, was forever changed. Number 12. Gulf of Tonkin Incident. Many people learn about the Vietnam War and the USA's role in it. What history classes rarely talk about is how the United States entered the war, however.
Johnson would use this incident to acquire the power to make war in Vietnam whenever and however he would choose.
On the 2nd of August, 1964, the USS Maddox was near North Vietnamese waters carrying out a patrol when it was attacked by local torpedo boats. While 4 of the attacking sailors died, no one on board the Maddox was killed. 2 days later, the Maddox experienced radar returns that had followed intercepted communications, which led them to believe an attack was imminent, even opening fire. However, there were no ships.
Were any North Vietnamese boats ever out there that dark night? At daybreak, reconnaissance planes scanned the ocean for a slick of oil, a stick of wood, anything that would be evidence of a North Vietnamese attack. Nothing could be found.
Miscommunications led to the attack being viewed as genuine and the U.S. entering the war, partially under false or misunderstood pretenses. Number 11. Native Code Talkers. The roles of Native Americans in war have often been overlooked.
Navajo Code Talkers, young Marine volunteers whose language was invaluable to the Corps in World War II.
Each division had at least 80 Navajo Code Talkers. That enemy would not understand, will never understand, what in the world is being planned.
During both the First and Second World Wars, Native service members from nearly a dozen tribes were employed as code talkers. Due to enemy forces being unfamiliar with their indigenous languages, codes delivered using them had an extra layer of encryption. In fact, not only did their codes contribute to important battles such as Iwo Jima, but their codes were never broken. Despite some recognition in popular media, the code talkers are rarely a part of standard school history education.
For the most part, their story was not told for many, many years. So it's such a relief, to know that the legacy is going to live on.
Number 10. Nanjing Massacre. Japan's invasion of China is undertaught as a whole. However, this incident in particular is often overlooked, or in the case of many in Japan, outright denied, likely because of how shocking and brutal it was.
In December 1937, risking his life, my grandfather used his camera to film the horrifying events in Nanjing.
Beginning in December of 1937 and continuing for several months, the Japanese Imperial Army killed thousands of prisoners of war, children, and women. Thousands of female residents of all ages were assaulted. You may be more familiar with the massacre's other name, the Rape of Nanjing. Torture and arson were also rampant, with a third of the city burning, while estimates of those attacked or murdered vary from a few thousand to hundreds of thousands. Even the low estimates make it a horrific war crime.
Japanese military and political leaders on trial denied the events in Nanjing, saying there had been no massacre of civilians and that claims of military captives being killed was misinformation.
Number 9. The Wall Street Attack. Before 9/11, the worst terror attack in the United States happened in 1920. During midday in September, a horse-drawn carriage rode down Wall Street, New York. It stopped outside the U.S. Assay Office and opposite the J.P. Morgan & Company building.
On September 16, 1920, as the bells of Trinity Church tolled and hundreds of Wall Street workers headed out for their noontime break, an explosion struck outside the headquarters of J.P. Morgan & Company.
The area was packed as workers went to get lunch, but then the driver vanished. Moments later, the wagon filled with dynamite exploded, causing shrapnel to fly everywhere.
The carnage was unlike anything America's largest city had ever seen, and was splashed across headlines for days.
At least 38 people and the horse perished from the attack, with 143 seriously injured. No group or individual came forward to claim responsibility. While authorities had many theories on who was responsible, no formal arrest ever happened, and it remains unsolved.
And in the end, no one was ever formally convicted of this heinous crime. Today, the only evidence that remains from that tragic event are from these shrapnel marks on the facade of J.P. Morgan's old building.
Number 8. The Iranian Revolution. After years of Iran being reigned by Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi and aligning himself with the West, tensions came to a head in 1978.
Daily, it has become more difficult to look at the scope of opposition to the Shah of Iran and still see his monarchy surviving. The Ayatollahs are committed to the ouster of the Shah and nothing less than that.
Supporters of cleric Ruhollah Khomeini, who had been in exile, believed he was routinely slandered by the country's press. On top of this, opposition against Pahlavi's rule blamed his secret police for the Cinema Rex fire that killed 477 people.
The protest of the masses turns into open violence. Tehran is ablaze. The military intervenes.
These, mixed with the Shah using the military to supplant his rule and viciously attacking opponents, caused many people to protest the monarchy. By 1979, this led to Pahlavi fleeing and the return of Ayatollah Khomeini, who became the first supreme leader of Iran, turning the country more politically conservative.
During his 10-year reign, he implemented his ideas of an Islamic revolution with uncompromising vigor and turned Iran into a theocracy.
Some believe this event inspired several uprisings in the Middle East. Number 7. The Stonewall Riots. Being part of the LGBTQ+ community in 1960s New York was rough. The police regularly targeted the then illegal group.
There were no instructions except put them out of business. The first police officer that came in with our group said the place is under arrest.
When people attended LGBTQ+ bars or clubs, many of which were operated by organized criminals, the cops would raid them and arrest those inside, often taking liberties with detainees. By June 1969, the situation hit a boiling point at the Stonewall Inn when the police raided the bar. With years of discrimination, violent attacks by the cops, and inspired by the civil rights movement, the LGBTQ+ community and supporters began rioting, which lasted for several days.
In the civil rights movement, we ran from the police. In the peace movement, we ran from the police. That night, the police ran from us. The lowliest of the low. And it was fantastic.
This sparked LGBTQ+ leaders to petition for rights. By 1970, the first Pride events happened in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and San Francisco.
Gay Liberation Front was born out of the ashes of Stonewall. Gay Liberation Front is literally why we have everything we have today.
Number 6, Bacon's Rebellion. Way before the American Revolution against Great Britain's reign came to be, the seeds of rebellion were sown in Virginia in 1676. The colonist Nathaniel Bacon was livid at Governor William Berkeley, his cousin, for the high taxes and his lack of support for attacking a Native American settlement. As such, he organized a makeshift militia formed of white and black people to lay siege to Berkeley within Jamestown. Bacon's forces caused the governor to flee as they set Jamestown aflame. By the time England sent a navy to battle the rebellion, Bacon had already passed from dysentery. With a lack of leadership, Berkeley's newly engorged forces defeated the militia, but the governor's reputation was left in tatters. Number 5, the Mao Massacre. In 1966, Mao Zedong's power in China was threatened after the disastrous Great Leap Forward that caused a massive famine. So he initiated the Cultural Revolution to renew the communist spirit and remove infiltrators.
Mao launches an attack on his internal political opponents, saying there are bureaucrats everywhere who want capitalism back. The people ought to display placards and expose these class enemies and their bourgeois thinking.
This caused youths to form groups like the Red Guard, who shut down schools, ransacked religious places, and slaughtered any perceived enemies of Mao's vision, such as party officials and intellectuals.
Mao sends his Red Guards into a war of symbols. He considers China's traditions and culture to be anti-socialist and seeks to destroy them.
While art and entertainment believed to be too Western were banned, including work by William Shakespeare. The Cultural Revolution eventually finished in 1976 with Mao's passing, but not before it destroyed the country's economy, took the lives of up to 2 million people, and forced around 20 million to flee the carnage Chairman Mao instigated.
Now is the Rega generation 70. I hope that they reflect, they regret, they re-examine. What should we prevent this kind of human tragedy happen again?
Number 4, the first bus refuser. While Rosa Parks is credited for ushering in the civil rights movement in the U.S. after refusing to give up her bus seat to a white person in 1955,
I didn't think I should have to get up. I had already paid my fare, and I'm sure he didn't pay any more than I did.
there was someone before who made a similar stand. 9 months before this monumental event, 15-year-old student Claudette Colvin refused to move on a bus for white passengers in Montgomery, Alabama. This led to her arrest and being convicted on multiple charges.
I felt as though Harriet Tubman's hand was pushing me down on one shoulder, and Sojourner Truth's hand was pushing me down on another shoulder. And between these two historical women's, iconic women's, I could not move.
Colvin was also involved in the court case that forced Alabama to end bus segregation. But even further back, in 1854 in New York, Elizabeth Jennings Graham was forcibly removed from a whites-only streetcar.
As they rode, he saw a police officer and flagged him down. The officer came aboard and ignored what Elizabeth had to say, throwing her to the ground and ruining her Sunday best.
So she took the Third Avenue Railroad Company to court and won, causing the firm to desegregate its streetcars. Number 3, the English Civil War. While England still has a monarchy, that hasn't always been the case. Charles I clashed with Parliament several times.
Charles distrusted parliaments absolutely and had governed the country for long periods without recourse to one.
With Catholics facing off against Protestants in several skirmishes adding to the fire, and Charles's religious loyalty questioned, things escalated when he entered the House of Commons and tried and failed to arrest opponents in 1642.
The attempted arrest was a tragic farce. The 5 members had long since escaped by boat. For the first time, a reigning monarch entered the House of Commons only to find himself humiliated.
This kicked off the first of 3 civil wars in England, Scotland, and Wales between the Royalists and the Parliamentarians. In 1649, a captured Charles was tried for treason, found guilty, and executed. By 1651, the Parliamentarians had won the final battle in the Civil War.
Charles died bravely on the scaffold, impeccable courage, but that's no more than would be expected from any gentleman facing the block.
With Oliver Cromwell in charge and later his son Richard, the Commonwealth of England reigned until 1660, when Charles II re-established the monarchy. Number 2. The Armenian Genocide. In the dying days of the Ottoman Empire, the Young Turk Revolution happened in 1908. After years of Christian Armenians being targeted by the country, they believed this was a positive turning point.
Ethnic groups within the Ottoman Empire were pushing separatist agendas. This rise of nationalism contributed towards the breakdown of the so-called millet system, in which religious communities under Ottoman rule were allowed a degree of autonomy.
Sadly, it wasn't. As nations were engrossed by World War I in 1915, the empire suffered heavy losses. As such, they shifted the blame onto Armenians. Authorities began arresting and either deporting or executing Armenians for treachery. Then, groups were taken from their homes and forced to walk through the Syrian desert without supplies, causing many to perish before they reached the terrible conditions at concentration camps. By 1916, there are estimates that at least 1 million Armenians were massacred in the genocide. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Number 1. The Tulsa Race Massacre. In May of 1921, the neighborhood of Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma was thriving, so much so that it was deemed Black Wall Street. But the segregated city was about to erupt in horrifying violence when black teenager Dick Rowland was falsely arrested.
The newspaper story is published around 3 o'clock. By 4 o'clock, a small group of white men have begun to assemble around and mill around the courthouse.
After the white and black communities faced off outside the courthouse, it sparked into a fight. However, the Greenwood community was outnumbered. Several white residents were deputized, handed weapons, and attacked Greenwood violently for over 18 hours.
I remember the people coming in, white people coming into our house with torches, setting the curtains on fire and setting our house on fire.
On top of buildings being set aflame, as many as 300 people were killed, with 800 injured, while thousands of people lost their homes.
The Red Cross recorded more than 300 people had been killed. Newspapers listed almost 100 deaths, but city officials put the death toll at 36.
In the immediate aftermath, the event was suppressed by the media. Only in recent years has it become more well known. Is there a forgotten part of history that we forgot? Transcribe your picks in the comments.
People have a tendency to forget their roots, and it's very important that we have some sense of where we came from, who came before us, the contributions they made, so that we can pass on some of their traditions to future generations.